Hi everybody, welcome back. We're now into the perception of space and reverb in music production. And I hope you find this very easy, and I'm going to try to simplify this as best as I can, and I also hope that you find this very valuable for your own production. We understand direction of sound, but our brain and ear combine to help us perceive the size and physical characteristics of a room or acoustic space as well. When a sound is made, a percentage of the sound reaches the listener, and a larger portion will fill the room, bouncing off walls, computers, and also being absorbed by couches, pillows, and carpets. So basically, if we've got the best guitar in the world, and we've got a really terrible room, that might not necessarily be a very good combination, right? Three types of reflections are commonly generated within an enclosed space. We have the direct sound, which determines our perception of a sound source's location and size, as well as conveys the timbre or sound characteristics of the source. And so as far as a guitar, piano, everything that we've talked about, the direct sound, that is our direct source. Early reflections give us clues as to the size and general makeup of an acoustic space. The further the boundary causing the reflection, the longer the delay back to the listener. And this we perceive as a big space. The sound also fuses together with the direct source. So with reverberation, when a room's reflection continue to bounce off walls, floors, etc., a randomly decaying set of sounds can be heard after the source stops. If a room is highly reflective, the reverb will last longer. If we have, let's just say, carpet on the walls, the room will last a very short period of time. So imagine then, if we went back to the campus, for example, in the hallway, we really don't have anything aside from tiles on the wall, and basically the stucco and, some of the concrete. So we have a very long reverb time. With carpet on the floor, with carpet on the walls, if we started putting up pillows, maybe some, couches and things like that, the reverb time or the reverberation would be much, much shorter, right? Our brain can tell the structure of the room based on these sounds and effects, can help create these sounds and perceptions. And so we don't necessarily have to be in this big, giant, huge space. Maybe we could simulate that. Many producers digitally simulate these reflections with impulse responses or digitally recreated spaces. Some professional plugins for reverb include Altiverb, for example. Let me just show this to you here. This, my friends, is right from their website. And that is Altiverb. What's really interesting, let's say, for example, if you wanted to simulate your recording in the Disney concert hall, this is how you could do it, for example. Or maybe simulate that you're recording in a pyramid or something. Check this out.
Hi, I'm Arjen, and this movie is all about Altiverb version 7. Do make sure you watch this movie in HD format down there in the YouTube bar. And if you can, use headphones or proper speakers. I'll use Pro Tools here to demonstrate, but Altiverb runs in most host applications. Here's Altiverb 7, the original professional convolution reverb plugin. It creates reverb by using actual samples of real spaces from all around the world. And as you see, Altiverb is bypassed now. If I hit play in Pro Tools, you'll hear some dry drums. When I switched Altiverb out of bypass, you heard the drums in the room that you see right here, which is Teldec Recording Studio in Berlin, Germany. So Altiverb applies the acoustics of a real room to your dry recording. It's a bit hard to believe. To do it, we need this. A click with a room's reverb tail. We get that click reverb by putting up microphones in a room together with a speaker. And because it's hard and dangerous to play back a loud click, we play back a sine wave sweep instead. We later calculate the sweep out of the recording, which gives us that click with reverb. Now take a look at one of your dry recordings. Zoom all the way in, and you'll find that it's a stepped line. Actually, each and every one of these steps is a click. Clicks are pointing up and down at different volumes, but essentially they're all the same. Now all we need to do is replace each click from the dry bass by a scaled click reverb that we just made in the room. and then the bass will end up sounding like it's played in that room. To illustrate, here's that dry bass actually played back through our onstage speaker in the Antwerp Opera and recorded at the balcony seats. And here's how close Altiverb gets to that. Amazingly close.
Almost identical, right? Now, it comes with a pretty hefty price tag. It's about $1,000. The next one I've got up here, and again, this is also third party, we have the Lexicon. I think some of you will also find this is really beautiful. And Lexicon, especially in the 80s and the 90s, it's second to none as far as reverb. So here's one that I really like to point out. This is their plug-in version. You don't need any hardware. This is going to also link into your DAW. And so if you've got this, you could maybe potentially use this. And this will also allow you to be able to link into some of those rooms and some of the ambience that we were just looking at. But to be able to simulate an actual room, I think is very, very powerful. And I think for many of you, that's going to be the next level for you, is to be able to have certain sounds that you have in your mixes coming from one room and another, groupings of, another grouping of sounds coming through another room, for example. Now, do you have to spend a bunch of money? Well, no. Logic Space Designer built in, you're able to use all these reverb types that you're going to be studying in this particular case. And so as far as the Space Designer here, this is straight from its website, 1,000 included impulse response samples, or you can edit your own. Really, really interesting. So just imagine all the rooms, all the spaces and everything, especially after we go through this, you're going to see you have a lot at your fingertips. So in order for us to use this properly, let's talk about the reverb types. So the first one that we want to look at is room reverb. And so of course I could easily go in to Logic and I could just pick a room. So if I came in here, you're going to see like large, medium, small spaces, and it gives me access to be able to pick this room and whatever room I decide to pick. But as you can see here, it's a certain size, right? And starting up here from 1.4 to 5.7. Medium spaces in this particular case, all basically presets essentially, right? Now, the most basic is the room, and a room is a space of walls, so it doesn't get much simpler. Your living room is a room, central space of a cathedral is a room, so it could be really, really large, it could be small, but just imagine that you don't necessarily want everything coming from a really large room, and you don't necessarily want everything coming from a small room. So we can do a push and a pull without having to have these particular spaces. We can actually simulate this, right? So what I also love about using rooms, there's a lot of imperfection in the sound of a room, so that's what we like about that. So imagine then you've got a digital piano within a software instrument. If I put room reverb over the digital piano, now the piano actually sounds a lot more lifelike because it puts those imperfections of the room reflection. We could also look at hall reverb. And hall reverb, the same idea. If I come back here to the Logic presets, you could see that I could also tap into, these large halls if we wanted to. And same idea. Tons and tons of presets all the way from 1.3 milliseconds down to 14.8. Large spaces to smaller spaces, but of course the hall is going to be a very, very different sound. So what exactly is that? There are rooms out there that are designed exactly with the goal of an incredible sound, and so the hall is one that is designed specifically for sound, for the enjoyment of music. They're built to have minimal room modes, echoes, ringing, and intended to sound as tonally musical as possible. So then what is a chamber? You can see here, they build these spaces in order to come up with something that's a little bit different. For example, I know some people will build their space out of maybe a racquetball court or something like that in their house, believe it or not. Capitol Records, for example, and I'll show you here, had their chamber designed by Les Paul himself. Chambers are the opposite from halls. They have color and texture and can sound great on all sorts of sources, and anything that needs a distinct bump in energy or extra texture can benefit. Chambers were largely used in R&B and classic rock records, and if that's the vibe you're going for, fire up the chamber. And as you can see here, this is very, very metallic sounding, huge, giant room. It would sound pretty wild, right? So, for example, at Capitol Records, and this is in Hollywood, the circular building, right? At Capitol, much of this magic is attributed to a curious design element that was created by Les Paul, the guitarist and inventor of the famous Gibson Les Paul guitar. Paul was commissioned to give the studio's reverb the sonic quality of echo and delay, or reverberation. Today, musicians use pedals attached to amps to easily achieve this, but in 1950, it apparently wasn't so easy, and this is Paul's challenge. So to create reverb, Les Paul built a series of 8 cavernous trapezoidal echo chambers dug 30 feet below the Capitol Record building. The sparse concrete chambers, each with their own unique characteristics, have speakers on one side and microphones on the other. Sound engineers working in the studio above can pipe audio into the reverb chamber and re-record the sound, adding as much as a 5-second delay, giving singers a booming vocal quality that makes it sound more like the track was recorded in a cathedral, not a sound studio in LA. Now, just think, in Capitol Records, essentially a glorified parking garage underneath the building, designed by Les Paul himself. That's how you get the reverb sound out of Capitol. And that's why bands, even including to this day, just imagine then the Beach Boys, Frank Sinatra, some of the biggest bands in the world, in the history of jazz and rock and roll, and in the history of pop, they're utilizing this reverb chamber that was built underneath Capitol Records. So the importance of reverb, I think, is really important. And also just, if you wanted to go back to the article, this is the article that I quoted there if you wanted to read the whole thing. Now, many of us had plate reverbs at the studio that we had. We had a plate reverb set up. It was really neat. It was definitely a go-to sound for many of us. Wonderful qualities to plates. They're made of 2 plates of metal housed in a case like a file cabinet. So you can see if we wanted a larger sound, we would take these plates and move them apart. If we wanted a tighter sound, we would take the 2 metal plates and move them closer. And then you'd have a speaker and a microphone, basically, and they're picking up their interaction, right? Because the speed of sound is much faster in metal than air, plates have a higher echo density. These 2 factors are what give plates their signature smooth reverb tail. There's a lot of people, well, I'll tell you what, especially in the 70s and the 80s, if you didn't have plate reverb, they wouldn't record at your studio. Now, if you have a drum kit with a couple of room mics, you could probably use a plate reverb on the snare, toms, and still have a cohesive sounding kit. So what I'm going to show you in the example here, as far as our mixing examples and how to professionally use these, ideas in reverb, I'll set it up where we could actually have the room on the kit. For example, I'll be calling up a rise on the track that we had just looked at with EQ and also compression. I'll put reverb over the drum kit, and then what I'll also do is just put some plate reverbs over maybe the snare and some of the tom hits and things like that, and you'll find it's really going to bring certain things out. Plates are also great for bringing out subtle pop or brightness to the sound source, making them ideal for pop vocals, acoustic guitars, pianos, synthesizers. They're huge for me in pop music. So as far as plate reverb, do we have that here? You do. If you look at all these large spaces, you'll see they have and give us access to plate reverbs. And I think for many of you, you'll find maybe potentially not knowing that these were the go-tos for many of the records that you love. Now, hopefully I can steer you in that right direction. They're really, really beautiful, and they sound wonderful. It'll definitely make the track stand out, that's for sure. Now, ambiance. Digital algorithms. The reality is that an algorithm isn't really a room, hall, or a plate. An algorithm is its own thing, and there's nothing wrong with a digital computer program actually recreating these sounds or creating these sounds, through a program. Just like how a chamber is not really a hall or a plate is not really a room. I see nothing wrong with it, right? Algorithms sound like what they emulate, but they're not the same. In most cases, ambiances will refer to a very short reverb with any sort of setup that the designer needs for the project, for example. So you could make a reverb sound that's all early reflections, late reflections, highly diffuse the sound, highly non-diffuse the sound, whatever, as long as it's indistinct. So just imagine then you've got this very reverberant sound and there's a ton of reverb, and at the same token, we would expect that sound to last, but maybe if that sound lasted too long, it would kind of ruin the mix. So what we could do is just make a very reverberant sound and then just cut it off out of nowhere. And a lot of us do that in pop, right? So might sound boring, but again, it's perfect for sounds that already have character and full harmonic spectrums, like synths and vocals. The shortest ambience are great for any source that you want, to sound dry, but still have a sense of three-dimensionality. And, like I said, I love doing that with vocals. You've just got this huge, giant vocal sound, but it doesn't last for, a very long period of time. It's one of those things. I have to have this ambiance set. And you'll also see in this particular case, there's a lot of these different sounds and spaces that we can have in this case. So I think what you'll find is that as you start, kind of looking around, that could be wonderful for bringing out, really interesting synth sound or something like that, or maybe making a vocal just sound, bigger than life, like a lot of the EDM vocals are, right? So continuing on, one of the things I would, hope that we could point out then, of course, is that we have the opportunity to be able to simulate all of these perceptions of space as we're making our mixes. And so what I'll do in the next video here is I'm going to show you exactly what we could do within the mix that we've just created. So again, I've got a rise set, and I'm going to open that up. I'll call up some reverb over all of the tracks that we've created, and hopefully give you some, some good ideas on exactly what you can do with your own tracks in order to create some of these reflections to make certain things maybe sound a little more interesting, or maybe sound a little more acoustic. I hope that helps. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I hope to see you guys soon. Take care, everybody.